Was Havana syndrome a cover-up by the Biden administration? The neurological incident remains disputed, but investigative journalist Catherine Herridge reports that some government officials claim they are suffering from Havana syndrome, and they have been completely ignored. For context, in 2016, American and Canadian officials stationed in Havana, Cuba, reported hearing strange noises accompanied by inexplicable neurological symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and so on.
Herridge recently sat down with retired counterintelligence officer Mike Betts, who says he suffered an attack in 1996 while on assignment. A decade later, his condition has deteriorated, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2006 when he was in his 40s. Thanks to Herridge's reporting, National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard is reportedly mulling over a probe into Havana syndrome. Catherine joins us now.
Thanks so much for being with us. Been such an admirer of your reporting on so many different subjects, looking into some of the Hunter Biden laptop information. It's really great to have you with us. This is a subject that we've heard from a lot of different perspectives on, even questioning how real it is. I myself have had some skepticism of it in the past, but you obtained and published some documents showing that the government itself, behind closed doors, was taking these concerns seriously and has to some extent validated them. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, we spoke with one of the nation's top neuroscientists, and he confirmed to us that directed energy weapon attacks are real, that the reports of attacks against U.S. government personnel overseas are credible, as well as reports of attacks targeting U.S. personnel inside the United States. And he explained to us that these types of attacks have been going back decades, and there are three types of weapons. Two are sonic, and one is a microwave energy weapon. But the bottom line is that they have the same effect on the brain. What it does is it disrupts the networks within the brain, and that does two things. Number one, it makes it hard for the brain to compensate. And then number two, this disruption of the networks gets worse over time. And based on our reporting, it leads to brain cell atrophy and brain cell death. So if you get hit by one of these directed energy weapons, the attack is just the beginning of the damage. There's a cascading effect over time, and the outlook for these individuals is unfortunately very bleak.
Sounds very, very troubling indeed. And what have you learned, Catherine, about the source of these types of attacks and the intent behind all of this?
Well, based on our reporting, there are three nations that have the capability for directed energy weapon attacks. That's the United States, Russia, as well as China. Based on my reporting, and I've spoken with well over a dozen government officials who believe that they have been hit by these directed energy weapons, almost all of them had some kind of portfolio that was related to or touched on Russia, either from an intelligence perspective or at least from the outside, it looked like they were working on a Russia account. So that certainly would suggest that Russia or some kind of proxy may be responsible.
And if our government behind closed doors does have this concern, why isn't someone sharing this with the American people? Why aren't there hearings? Why isn't Congress taking up this issue? If a hostile foreign power is targeting our diplomatic personnel in another country and people becoming horrifically ill, I would think that would be something that Congress should be talking about very seriously. And it sounds like from what you're telling us is that behind closed doors there is a greater concern, but I can't tell if it's something like, for instance, with the UAP situation where everyone is so freaked out and the government is kind of like, don't worry about it, because they know that it's actually a lot of their technology, which is up in the skies, that they don't want to tell us about. So it almost makes me paranoid then, is this our government or something if they don't want to have hearings about the issue? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think I do. I'd say there are two very significant developments in the last 6 months. One was an interim report from now the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Rick Crawford, which really called out the intelligence community and said, we've seen pretty significant intelligence that indicates that directed energy weapon attacks are real against U.S. government personnel, and that there's been a real sort of obfuscation, some would say a cover-up by elements of the intelligence community on Havana syndrome. Number two, in response to our recent investigation on X, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the top intelligence official in the United States, has committed to doing a new assessment into Havana syndrome. And I've been covering this story on and off for about 6 years, and I'm really sensing that there is a sea change within the US government, that there may finally be a public acknowledgement that US government personnel have been targeted overseas and domestically in the United States, and that it's been done willfully and with intent by a foreign adversary or one of their proxies.
Catherine, how widespread are these attacks? How many people are impacted? What's the scope that we're talking about here?
Well, for some context, they're reported well over 1,000, 2,000 incidents. I don't think all of those are credible reports, but there are several hundred, I think, that are absolutely credible. And you may say, why? I mean, a few hundred people. Why is that such a big deal? It's a big deal because these are people who are working the tip of the spear in national security for the US government. And these attacks have a crippling effect on them neurologically, but these are also weapons of psychological warfare. If you're a diplomat or you're a spy or you're a national security professional, and you know people in your community are being targeted when they're overseas with crippling injuries, you are less reluctant to go overseas. This makes it difficult to recruit people and then also to retain people. So it's not just the physical injury, it's essentially a psychological weapon as well.
Has the government been exploring the possible, motivations of hostile foreign powers who might be deploying such technology? Obviously, we're not in a direct military conflict with Russia or China. Is it simply a kind of, are they experimenting on some technology that they have? Is there some national security goal Russia or China or whoever it is might have to weaken our diplomatic corps or make people less likely to sign up to be U.S. diplomats? Is there thinking a lot of speculation about what the actual motivation might be beyond just they're nefarious and they're doing nefarious things? That seems almost too dumbing it down too much.
What I would say is that these attacks may have been motivated by different intents. For example, there was a huge cluster of cases in 2016 at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba. Almost 24 people were affected. That, was really a watershed moment. But the attacks had been going on previously for decades, but in much smaller numbers. What was the intent of that attack? One can make the argument the intent was to try and force the US diplomatic presence out of Cuba, to shut down that embassy, because it created so much fear among US government personnel who were stationed there. Who would benefit from that? Well, Russia would benefit, China would benefit. So I think you have to see these as discrete events. They may have different motivations or different intentions.
So where do we go from here? As you mentioned, there's a psychological impact, and the Director of National Intelligence is looking at a probe, but should the administration be considering different protocols? Should there be more communication about the potential threats? Where do you think we should be heading?
Well, the US government has not been monolithic in its view towards anomalous health incidents or Havana syndrome. The Department of Defense, to its credit, has been much more forward-leaning in the treatment of its personnel and also trying to find ways to mitigate this threat in the future. Directed energy weapons are what I would call classic gray zone warfare. It's in this sort of gray area between outright conflict and peace. So the Defense Department has been much more forward-leaning. What matters now is whether the Director of National Intelligence is going to call a spade and say, listen, the previous intelligence assessments on Havana syndrome were defective. We've released a new one. We think that some of these cases absolutely were the work of a foreign adversary and a novel weapon, and that we're going to take care of people. In our reporting, we showed how this counterintelligence officer, Mike Beck, had been hit in 1996. He's had this progressive brain injury at 63. He's now in assisted living because he can't live at home. His family can't care for him any longer. Yet he's been fighting every step of the way to be compensated and recognized by the US government. And it took our reporting for more than $25,000 in outstanding payments for his assisted living from workers' comp to finally be paid. That really shouldn't be necessary for these people. I can't go out and help every individual intelligence officer or military operative or spy to get what they're really owed by the government, for the government to really have their back, having made this ultimate sacrifice for our national security.
Catherine Herridge, fantastic reporting. And again, I'm such a fan. So grateful to have you on the show to discuss. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Coming up is Pete Buttigieg setting himself up for a 2028 run. We'll discuss. Stay with us.